Yes. Welcome, everyone. I don't have my headphones on. That's not a good start. It's not a good start to the show. The Stone Jesus Show presents Weed News for March 3rd, 2022. We're going to try to get past that rough start. That's fine. This is a simple fix. Don't have the headphones on. What do? You put them on. Broadcasting tip for those of you out there aspiring to be like me. Check us out on Patreon. Only $1 a month. Get you all the new episodes of Weed News, all the weed news you need to know, and all the commentary you can't get anywhere else from a very smart person, that being me. That's right. I just call myself a smart person. I'm humble when I need to be, but not right now. First story from Politico.com. Biden administration to applicants, maybe don't invest in weed company. New policy underscores how the business of weed, ever more legitimized, is forcing adjustments by the feds. Smoking weed may no longer be the only potential impediment to getting a job with security clearance in the Biden administration. Why you would want one, I don't know. Investing in cannabis companies could now trip up applicants too. The Biden administration has expanded its employee conduct guidelines to potentially deny security clearance to individuals who have invested in companies that are involved in the marijuana business, according to an internal executive branch presentation shared with Politico. According to the document, quote, eligibility may be negatively impacted if an individual knowingly and directly invests in stocks or business ventures that specifically pertain to marijuana growers and retailers. Decisions to willfully invest in such activity can reflect questionable judgment and an unwillingness to comply with laws, rules, and regulations. The recently updated guidance is the latest illustration of the federal government trying to grapple with its cannabis-related HR policies as the product has become accepted legal business, medication, and recreational substance in states across the country. It's a nice way of saying that the Biden administration, after talking a big game during the campaign about how they're going to do this and then support this and decriminalization of weed and blah, 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 Biden, Harris, they all gave you this bullshit. None of it was true. They have lifted a finger to support any of it that's going on in Congress right now. They've done nothing. Nothing. Which is to be expected. But the federal government's having a hard time grappling with marijuana, blah, blah. No, they're not. They're not having a hard time at all. They can, if they are having a hard time, they can make it much easier on themselves by legalizing marijuana. This is not a hard thing. What they're grappling with, I don't know. They're certainly not grappling with the decision. I think what a lot of them are grappling with is not having any balls. Cojones, if you will. Better known as balls. I hate when I bring up a website and it just starts glitching because there's so much garbage on your website. And it's always this type of website. You see this right here? See this X? Because this thing is on top of a background. There's basically two fucking web pages here for no reason. It can only be one page. I don't need to close this and still have this back here. If I need to close this story, I'll close the tab. I don't need to close this and then still have this bullshit in the background. It's always those websites. I blame USA Today. That's the way USA Today's website's been for years. It's always fucking annoyed me. And so many news sites and magazine sites have copied that stupid setup. You don't need a web page layered on top of a background. It should all just be one fucking page. It's news. People are coming for the entertainment value or your skills in graphic design. Just want the fucking story. In this case, from WorcesterMag.com and their shitty USA Today website, Cannabis Confidential, a few industry big boys putting out quality marijuana flower. Basically, this guy's talking about the best marijuana flower you can find from the big corporations that are invested in or in the cannabis space at this point. But he talks about early on is something that happens in every industry and people are going to have to grapple with, not the way the federal government is grappling with cannabis legalization. THC, CBD, TAC, RMD. There's a lot of three-letter abbreviations in the cannabis space. In recent years, another one has appeared, MSO, short for multi-state operator, a cannabis company that operates in multiple states. When people speak of MSOs, they usually aren't talking about a small, independently owned chain that happens to operate in more than one territory. They're more likely referring to large, publicly traded corporations that operate in the retail, cultivation, and/or product manufacturing space in the industry. course, by establishing operations and brands in a number of markets across the country, MSOs are hoping to obtain an advantage once cannabis is legalized at the federal level. By already having an established national presence, they can quickly be pushed into emerging markets. Um, Unsurprisingly, the business tactics of MSOs are not exactly winning over a lot of people in the cannabis space. Many large companies are actively lobbying states to put up as many hurdles as possible for potential local operators and other possible competitors. This is the key paragraph, in my opinion, to this story because all big corporations do this, and they're able to do this because of the government. You see it in this paragraph. Many large companies are actively lobbying states. They're using the power of the state government, the local government, the federal government, whatever the situation may be, to increase regulations, increase hurdles, increase barriers for smaller companies to get in. Because bigger companies, of course, and then, like I said, this applies in cannabis or any other industry. You can apply it to Amazon, Walmart, anybody. They're fine with regulations. They're fine with all that bullshit because they can absorb the cost. But they're smaller, more nimble, maybe better competitors, newer competitors cannot absorb that cost, and they are wiped out from the industry, leaving the big corporations. This trajectory of this happening has been accelerated by COVID, where a lot of the small companies in whatever industry you want to say if they were affected by the lockdowns, they weren't able to absorb the cost of that. But the big companies, the big corporations, they were able to absorb that cost, so they're still around and they're in a better position than ever because their smaller competitors who may have challenged them at some point are no more, and that's what's happening in the cannabis industry. And it's even worse because there's so much regulation in the cannabis industry already. And once there are some big players in the cannabis industry, which there are, they can use those regulations to basically club their competition to death, like some sort of poor baby seal who's just been clubbed to death. That paints a picture, doesn't it? Doesn't sound good, does it? What's the key? Give government less power over whatever industry you're worried about. Less regulations, less barriers, less hurdles, more competition. All of those things help an industry. They don't necessarily help the big corporations, but who gives a shit? Fuck them. Not worry about the big corporations, worry about the consumer. That's the important part. If you can't handle smaller, more nimble, better competition, then go out of business. Fuck you. I mean, we don't still go to Sears, do we? Or Woolworths. We still shop at the A&P grocery store chain. These were huge corporations, dominant in their fields, and now they're no more because bigger or smaller, better, newer competition moved in and took them out. Places like Walmart was one of the downfalls of places like Sears and A&P. Big grocery store chains, places like that. Nothing is forever, but you can get it close to forever if you can keep out your smaller competitors, which a lot of these corporations do. This last story is from MarijuanaMoment.net. GOP Congresswoman says her marijuana legalization bill will get a hearing in a Democratic-controlled Congress. As advocates push for congressional action on Democratic-led marijuana legalization bills in the House and Senate, a Republican Congresswoman who's championing an alternative reform measure says she has received assurances that there will be a hearing on her proposal, even as a minority member of the chamber. She said also that recently internal polling she's done for her reelection campaign shows voters in her district are on her side when it comes to cannabis, even as her primary election challenger and her own state party attack her for reform efforts. Representative Nancy Mace, a Republican from South Carolina, spoke about the path forward for her state's Reform Act, SRA, during an interview published on Thursday with the Psychoactive podcast, hosted by longtime legalization advocate and Drug Policy Alliance founder Ethan Nadelman. And it goes on to talk about all the different bills that are in Congress right now and the possibilities of them getting hearings and being moved up and actually getting a vote on the floor. All of this is moving at a glacial pace because nobody in the federal government gives a shit. It's 2022. The federal government's stance is still that marijuana has no medicinal value and should be legal for no reason other than industrial hemp. She's talking about having a companion bill for her bill filed on the Senate. A lot's going to get changed up this November because with Biden being so unpopular, And the fact that the midterm elections for a sitting president always go against him, almost always. It's not looking good. I mean, the Democrats are going to get slaughtered in November. They just are. I mean, history tells us anything about what's going to happen. It's going to be pretty brutal. So the Republicans may take back the House. They may expand get a lead and maybe a little buffer room in the Senate. Who knows? That's going to affect marijuana legalization on the federal level quite a bit. Legalization that's already not going anywhere. And I wouldn't hold my breath anytime in the next couple of years expecting a big push. There's always going to be something bigger, something more important. No, we can't talk about this right now. This isn't a good thing. We'll put it on the back burner till later. Just smoke weed. Fuck it. Fuck it. The government's not coming to save you. They're not coming to make it legal. They're not coming to help you out at all. Just fucking blaze up, son. That's my advice for this episode of Weed News. Go subscribe on Patreon, patreon.com/stonerjesus for $21 a month. It's awesome. Blaze up. Peace.